talk about your cell transport, how stuff gets in and out of the cells. Because it's not a closed system. Stuff has to go in and out, and we have to have ways to get through there. But before we do that, we need to do a little reviewing of what a solution is. And remember, you've done solutions back in chemistry, and it's when one thing dissolves in another. We have two parts to it. We have the solvent and the solute. The solvent is the liquid part of it. The solute is the thing that dissolves. So in this case, like with our Kool-Aid man here, the solvent is the water, the solute is the Kool-Aid. If you're making chocolate milk, the solvent is the milk, the solute is the chocolate. If you're eating like a Smarties candy, the solvent is your saliva, and the solute is the candy. And so that's how I remember which one's which, is I think you've been candying, and my saliva is the solvent. Okay, so the other thing you need to remember is concentrations. The more stuff you have, the closer those molecules are together. So if I take the same Kool-Aid packet and put it in a cup of water, or if I put it in a swimming pool, right, in my cup of water, the molecules, those solute particles, are really close together, so it's a high concentration. And in that swimming pool, they're really spread out, so it's a low concentration. So concentration is also going to be important as we go through things. Your fluids, you need to know where they are and what they're called. So the stuff inside your cells is called intracellular fluid, because intra means within and inside. So the stuff inside your cell, inside that cytoplasm, right? You've got all these gases and stuff and nutrients and water and stuff like that. Outside the cell is called interstitial fluid, because inter means between. So that's the fluid floating around between your cells. So that way we have, instead of just outside or inside, we have a name for it. Outside the cell is called interstitial fluid. Inside my cell is intracellular. Okay, so you know where things are located. And remember that plasma membrane is selectively permeable. It chooses what comes in and out of the cell. It's kind of like a bouncer for the club. Like, who can come in? Nope, you're not allowed. Yes, you can leave. No, you haven't paid your tab yet. You can't leave yet. It controls what goes in and who can come out. Both things. So that way, you know, desirable stuff like nutrients, water, things like that. Yeah, we want that to come in. Stuff that we want to go out. So like sometimes like your endocrine organs, right? They produce hormones that we want those to get released out into the bloodstream. Waste products, we want those to go out. So, but we want our organelles to stay inside. We need them there. So that way your membrane has that control. Problems occur when this doesn't work properly. If the cell dies or is damaged for some reason, like you get a burn on your arm or whatever, that hurts that plasma membrane and it can't work properly anymore. Some examples in real life is like when you get a burn, right? Like if I touch something hot, those cells die, and now all the fluid inside of them, that membrane breaks apart and that fluid leaks out. And so that's why when you get a burn, it kind of becomes like wet and weepy looking and watery, and that's why. The other thing you need to be aware of is Brownian motion. Brownian motion is that particles are constantly moving around. They have kinetic energy. Remember from physics, that's the energy for motion. And so they're bumping into each other and colliding all the time, sending them in all different directions. That's what Brownian motion is. And we depend on that to make those molecules move, right? Like those molecules aren't just staying in one place. They're moving around. And the reason they move is because they're constantly bumping into each other. And then so with stuff moving into the cell, some things go through all on their own pretty easily, and we call that passive transport, because it happens without any energy use, right? Like that's the top of the main stairs at whenever school gets out, right? You can just get carried down those stairs. That doesn't take any energy. That's passive. Versus active is if you try to walk up those stairs against the flow of everybody, that's going to use a lot of energy in that ATP. So stuff moves through this membrane either passively, all on its own, or actively, means that it requires some energy input. The other thing is it depends on diffusion. Just kind of a quick reminder of what diffusion means, right? That's where your particles are going to spread out and take up all the available space so they're evenly distributed, right? I don't want a whole bunch here and just a few over there. I want them even concentration all the way through. So like if I sit here and sprayed perfume on myself, it's not going to stay right here. It diffuses through the whole room, right? Like that's the same thing with smoking. Like with people who are smoking or vaping, that doesn't stay just with them. That smell permeates the entire area, right? So things are going to diffuse. Just like if I put food coloring in a glass of water. Doesn't stay right there. It's going to diffuse and take up the whole space, right? Our cells and our liquids and everything else in our body does the same thing. So diffusion is a type of passive transport, right? It doesn't have to take any energy. I don't have to stir that glass. I don't have to mix it up. There's no energy input. It just happens all on its own. And it's going to follow what we call the concentration gradient, right? So most things will follow this, and they go from a high concentration out to a lower concentration, right? Same with my perfume, where I sprayed it right here. I have a high concentration, and it's diffusing outward to where there's a lower concentration of molecules. Same thing with your smoke or your vaping. High concentration diffuses out to lower concentrations. So the first one we're going to look at is called simple diffusion. This is just that. It happens simple, it's easy, it happens all on its own. And this is where stuff moves through that plasma membrane all on their own. Now, if it's moving through that plasma membrane, there are two qualities that it needs to meet. The first, because you can see, it's got to go between these tiny little membranes, right? That lipid bilayer, here's one layer of lipids, here's the other layer of lipids with their little tail-to-tail kind of thing. So if stuff's going to get through here, it has to meet two requirements. One, it has to be very small to be able to fit between these molecules. So something big like glucose C6H12O6, it's way too big to fit through this tiny little opening. So it can't do this. But something small like oxygen, O2, that's two little molecules. That can do that, no problem. So it's going to diffuse between here. So one, it has to be small enough, and two, it has to deal with this fatty portion. Because remember, this is your lipid bilayer. So this lipid, remember these fatty tails pointing towards each other. So that's like there's some lipids there. So not everything likes those lipids, right? So they don't always mix with each other. So these two things have to be met for it to go straight through. But you can see it's going from a high concentration to a lower concentration area, and it's keep going till it's equal, right? Because it's not like everything moves one side or everything moves to the other. It wants all about to be in balance. So the next type is for things like glucose that are too big to fit. They do facilitated diffusion. They get help from a protein. Either they're too big or they can't deal with that fatty layer, so they use a protein molecule to help them get through. And that's what you can see here. And in this example, it's going from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell, but still higher concentration out to a lower concentration. So this is getting help from that protein to be able to move through. Like if it's too big to fit through here, I can use the doorway to help it. Water actually does both. They're tiny molecules. They have so much energy they can like Red Rover push themselves through that membrane. But you also have what are called aquapores, aqua meaning water, that are little proteins designed so water can get out, in and out, and move easily. And we'll talk about water movement a little bit later. This is just a comic I like. It says, what you got there, Jim? And he says, transport proteins. And he goes, zzz, and he gets out of the cell. Get it? I know, I've got to have something to make cell transport a little more exciting. All right, movement of water. That's what we call osmosis, is the movement of water molecules. Because remember, they don't really like those fats. But water, we again want it to move equally, and because of those pores, it can move through there really easily. Water, this is important, that's why it's in bold, will always go to where there's more solute. Always. Because that means it's a higher concentration, and I need the water to go over there to dilute it and even things back out. And this becomes really important when we talk about tonic solutions. We're going to look at these a little more tomorrow. There's a couple of videos in a lab you're going to do. But tonic solutions are really important. Isotonic, iso means same. So this is where I have the same concentration inside and outside of my cell. So everyone's all balanced and good and happy. Now, it doesn't mean they stop moving, right? We still have Brownian motion, so stuff moves in, stuff moves out, but it's all moving equally, so everyone's kind of balanced and happy. Hypertonic contains more solutes than the cell, so the solution has more stuff in it, so the water's going to leave the cell and go out there to where the more stuff is, and therefore, since my cell lost water, it's going to start to shrink and shrivel. I think of people who are hyperactive, right, because they're going and going and going, they're going to lose a lot of water and get smaller. Hypotonic means the solution contains fewer solutes. So now my cell has more solutes, water goes to where there's more solutes, and now that cell is going to start to get bigger and bigger because of the water coming in. And so I think of a hippopotamus as hypo, sounds like hippo, and it's going to make your cell get big and fat like a hippo. So that's how I remember what everything means. Well, like I said, we'll talk about them a little more tomorrow in more detail. But you can see here, isotonic, right? Our blood cells need to be isotonic with our blood. So they're floating around nice and good and happy. But if you eat too much salt, right now there's too much salt in the blood, and the water's going to have to go out there and dilute that, which is going to, one, put more pressure in your blood on your blood vessels, and your blood cells are going to lose some stuff. This is why when people are told they have high blood pressure, first thing your doctor tells you to do is cut the salt from your diet because it's affecting you. Or this can happen, and I have too much water. This is why you can't drink distilled water. Now my cells have too much stuff inside, and the water goes in, causing them to rupture. And that's just another picture. All right, the last thing that is also simple diffusion, or passive, is filtration. And this is what happens in your kidneys, like, because your blood is coming in, all the stuff filters out, and then that way you can get rid of those waste products and things like that. Main thing you need to know here is that it's happening in the kidneys and that it is a passive transport. So, passive transports, we did simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis, and filtration. Those four. On to active. These require energy. These, you have to use that ATP to make this happen. It's not going to happen all on its own. And the reason it needs energy is because it's going against the concentration gradient. You are fighting traffic on this one, okay? Because these are going from an area of low concentration up to higher concentration. I don't know if you've ever seen video from the 70s where they tried to, like, see how many people they could fit in a car or a phone booth, right? And you're shoving and shoving and shoving and shoving more and more people in there. Well, it's going to take more and more energy because I'm going low concentration to a high concentration, okay? That's active transport. So there's a few types of that. The primary one, you use the solute pump, right? I've got a protein that's pushing things against that concentration gradient to put more and more stuff out there. An example of this, and we'll do this again when we get to the nervous system, is your sodium-potassium pump. So what this does is, for your nerves to send signals, sodium and potassium move through, and now I have to reset. So I'm pushing sodium out there and kicking it out of the cell, but now I've got so much sodium out, I got to push it out there to make it keep going, right? So it's going from low concentration out to higher concentration, and I have to use this pump to make that happen. And so what that does is it's pushing out 3 sodiums and picking up 2 potassiums because they're going against their concentration gradient, so you have to use ATP. The other thing, and this is just kind of a picture of that, is bulk transport. Now I got to move a whole bunch of stuff all at one time. That's going to use a lot more energy, right? Just like if I'm carrying one grocery bag or if I'm carrying all my grocery bags all at the same time, it requires a lot more energy. So same thing here. Endocytosis, endo meaning inside, cyto meaning cell, means I'm taking stuff inside my cell. My membrane actually surrounds it, and then you have this little vesicle come floating down carrying that stuff. Exocytosis is just the reverse, where I've got a little vesicle comes up and it merges with the membrane and kicks that stuff out of the cell. So that's exocytosis, is that it's using a lot of stuff, to energy to make that happen because of those changes in my membrane. All right, and that's it. So good luck. If you have questions, please let us know and watch some of the other videos to help you out.